This is a conversation with Ben and Frances Goplen at Long Prairie in March of 1982.
The tape starts with Frances talking about Sophia Goplen, or Sophia, as she called her.
They took the cows up to the mountains and kept them there all summer, and they made butter and cheese up there then, and lived there all summer long. And once in a while somebody would come from down below and take the cheese and butter to market, you know. They evidently had a spring house by the creek, a creek that was spring-fed, and there was some kind of a building there that they could keep it kind of halfway cool in, you know. And I remember her telling about that they bake just quantities of flat brown, you know what that is, the flat bread that they bake on the stove. And it's dry, kind of like crackers, but it's in the diameter is about this. And she'd roll it out real thin, and then she kept the top of the stove just, you know, shining clean, and she put it right on the stove, the wood stove, and baked it. She had a stick that she whittled out of a little bush that she got in the woods, and some way she turned it with that, you know. I know it was a little bigger than a pie crust would be when you have a pie crust rolled out, you know. And this gets very dry, and it's made with cornmeal and flour and potatoes, I think. And she said they'd make up just quantities of that and take along up there. And they stored it in crocks, you know, earthenware crocks, and it kept, you know, and that was what they used for bread nearly all summer long. And she told about how beautiful it was up in the mountains, and how peaceful it was and quiet, and you just you had to kind of herd the cows, but the main thing was to milk them morning and night, you know, and then take care of the milk and churn the butter, make the cheese.
Yeah, because we found...
And she told about when they came over, they were quarantined on an island, you know, and Ben says it wasn't Ellis Island. I guess they landed where, Ben? Quebec?
She always said she came landed Quebec.
Well, anyway, they were detained on an island someplace because there was some disease with the group that came over, but and that wasn't very pleasant because they were quite crowded. And I have read how crowded the immigrants were on Ellis Island and how they were often almost mistreated. But she didn't think it was Ellis Island. She thought it was someplace else.
I thought they came in at Quebec.
I didn't know there was an island around Quebec. I suppose. Oh yes, there's islands in the St. Lawrence River, but I don't know the name of them.
So they must have came down by ship, then down the St. Lawrence River.
To Quebec,
to
yeah.
Quebec.
Of course, that was open for ocean-going boats, you know, always, ever since we've known about American history.
Of course, back then the ocean-going vessels weren't very large.
No, that's true.
No.
Because that was back in...
And then they came...
I didn't think they were big until I went to Duluth.
They came by...
Yeah, right.
By train and by walking to Wisconsin. Evidently, they had relatives who were living there, and that's why they headed for Wisconsin. But she never told me anything about her married life, you know, her when they were first married and the children coming and all that. But she was a woman that worked so terribly hard all her life. You see, because I think she worked hard, worked right like a man in the fields and everything. They raised tobacco in Wisconsin, and I guess that's a lot of work, hoeing and picking it and hanging it and drying it and everything. And then she worked, you know, always. She helped with the chores ever since I've known her. And then she was a midwife, you know, and my niece's husband, Kermit Christensen, who lives at Motley, was it's in May Township where the Goplen farm is, you know, and he was the clerk, and he showed me some of the old books when I was at his place once, And she had delivered, you wouldn't believe the baby she had delivered. It told the name of the parent and whether the child was male or female and who delivered it. And it was so many of them, Sophia Goplen, Sophia Goplen, Sophia Goplen. I just wish I had gone through that book and counted, you know. But even after we were married, people used to come and get her in the night and take her, and she'd go and stay like for 2 weeks. And she did everything, not only nursing, but she did the housework and helped with the chores and did the washing by hand and everything. You just can't believe how that woman worked. And we were saying not long ago, we were talking about her, she was a lovely cook, and I don't think she had a recipe. Everything was in her head, and she didn't even bother to measure sometimes, but things just turned out right, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would see her stirring up stuff, and I think, I wonder what kind of this is going to be, you know. Because I was a young, silly bride, you know, and I had to have a recipe for everything and everything. But she really was a good cook. And she could cook with so little, you know, because she'd always learned to be so saving and get along.
You had to cook with little because
She didn't have it.
Have all that. Yes, and if you wanted spices.
And she was such a remarkable woman that I didn't realize it when I was living with her, you know, but now when I look back, I've gained a little sense in the years that have gone by, I realize that she was just a very remarkable woman. And she walked, she didn't think anything of walking, you know, if she went, see, we were about, I guess were we two miles from George Green's?
Yeah.
And she would want to go down, that was her daughter, Emma. And she'd want to go to Emma's and she helped Emma so much because Emma was like her mother. She worked out all the time with her husband in the field and with the chores. And she'd walk down there, and maybe at the end of the day, after working hard all day, she'd walk home. Maybe she'd stay overnight, come home, you know, later on. And she just knew every inch of that farm. She knew there were so many wild berries in those days. See, I'm 76, and I suppose I was 18 when I wasn't 18 when I first knew her, but I mean, I suppose I was 16 when I first met her. And from then on, in the summer, when I was home, see, my parents lived just not very far from the Goplen farm, too. They bought a farm there when I was a junior in high school. I moved there. And we would go, in the spring, first it would be wild strawberries. We would actually get them by the milk pail full. Oh, what a job to pick those over. But my parents usually did the picking over. I went with Mother Goplen picking. And there was all kinds of berries, you know, raspberries and blackberries and blueberries. Oh, such lovely blueberries. And there was even wild plums, you know. And she knew just where to go. She knew just every inch of their own farm and all the farms around, you know. And sometimes we'd take a sandwich and we'd be gone out in the woods all day because she knew where there were springs or where the creek. Have you ever been? No, you haven't been to the farm enough to know. There's an ice pond out east in the woods, and it's got rocks in, and there's a spring that feeds that, and it's so pretty there. The trees used to be so beautiful, and you could walk on the rocks, and that was always such clear, good water. When we went that way, we always drank there, you know. And
I don't know about Mosquito Creek, but...
Well, Mosquito Creek flows out of that. That is the beginning, I guess, or maybe not the beginning, but I think that is Mosquito Creek, isn't it, Ben?
Actually, we had 80 acres east to, well, it was about a mile, but there was two big springs. They were quite close together. They probably came from the same vein, I don't know. But the creek went on farther north than that. If it was dry in the summertime, though, farther on beyond there, it would dry up. But those springs, they ran same flow year round. and the water had quite a little iron on it, in it. There's a lot of red deposit where the water came out.
Is that the same Mosquito Creek then that ran down and went by Palmer's?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the same.
East of Palmer's there was two branches farther north. There was the east branch road went through our farm, and then before you get to the farm, coming in from the road, there's Mosquito Creek there. That's the west Mosquito. And they joined about it was about 3 miles south of there. They joined it's about a mile, a mile, maybe a little better than a mile. If you go straight east from Palmer's whole place. The two joined about a little over a mile north from there. In the spring, the fish was running there. We used to spear. We call them pickerel. Now they go by the name of Northerns, of course. They were the first ones. They'd run first, and then the suckers would run later. We used to spear quite a few fish.
Going up that little creek there. Yeah, and if it's just west of Palmer's, then that's where Hazel used to live.
Long Lake.
Yeah, I've been to both of those places, but I haven't figured out where Ole's place was in relation to those two.
Well, it's
Is that Louis affair? Ole?
No.
It's the original.
Ole is my father. You knew that. I think it's 4 miles north of the. I believe it's 4 miles. And then you turn off to the right, and it's a little over a mile east.
So it was just a few miles then from Palmer's farm.
Yeah, I guess. No, I think it's 3 miles north. Can't be more than 3 miles north. That's what's the number of that highway again? 34?
No, 64.
Yeah.
64.
Yeah, we got a
star route when I was a kid, run between Motley and Leader, and he'd haul passengers and mail.
Horses? Horses and wagon and sleigh in the wintertime.
Francis' brother was a rural carrier out of Motley for several years until he died. His route ran over in towards east of Staples. Well, it went north out of town, went east for a ways, and then north, and then back. I don't know where it all did go. He used to start out with horses. Well, in the wintertime, they had horses, but they didn't plow the roads. And he finally, anyhow, he had 2 teams. He had kind of a midway place along the road where he kept one team, and he'd stop there for dinner and change horses.
So one team didn't make the whole trip then?
No. And later on, he had a Ford, he bought one of these track outfits with skis in front. They worked out pretty good.
And the Model T, Model A type, something,
Model T,
Model T, that was converted with tracks and skis. I've heard of those things.
Why don't you get that box and let him go through it?
They were iron bound, but actually, it's too bad that they weren't taken care of. I remember when I was a kid, they used one of them in the barn for a feed box.
Well, I think those that were left, I think the Goplen kids, the Engel Goplen kids, some of them got a couple.
But
Mother Grandpa said that in their way their name was Nehus, and they called them Nelson when they came to this country. So they're the same,
Well, they came from the Nyhus farm.
Yeah.
Anders was a Nyhus, really.
Yeah. Well, there's Nyhus that was on those chests, I remember.
Well, I don't get Alvin written out. That looks like my father. Could be.
Well, I just
Because it's full of Goplen.
Is that right?
Oh, scary. There isn't anything there anymore. A couple little buildings down by the highway that looked like they might have been a station or something at one time, but
I remember, I think Palmer told us that the church had burned and the records had burned, or was it England? Long years ago, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And now this is the church that's been built up after that.
Yeah, that one was built about 23 or so, I think, when I saw it. So that's why I was wondering, back in that time, when you traveled from Wisconsin, do you come by train or
immigrant car.
an immigrant car?
Can you remember coming here, Ben, or were you too young?
No, I don't remember coming here.
Well, now, my folks came to Motley by immigrant car, but my two brothers rode. We had two cars, and livestock and furniture and machinery and everything, and they rode in the cars. But the rest of us traveled on the passenger train.
So they had a special train that was set up for just moving.
Yeah, you could rent a boxcar.
It was just a box
And
car
put all
that you
your stuff in
rented.
it.
See?
Oh, okay.
And,
Just put all
Livestock and everything else.
livestock and all your farming equipment and stuff, and you just took the whole.
And they just, had, you took along hay and feed for your animals and everything, and they had bedding and slept on the hay when they were
I
traveling.
can't remember that, but I can remember when your folks moved, there was a group of the neighbors we organized and moved the whole outfit out in one day. I don't know how many people there were. It was still snow on the ground. We had a sled. And I remember helping unload and hauling the stuff out.
Oh, that road north of Motley there, when I went out first in the sled, I thought that was the longest road I'd ever traveled in my life. I was a junior in high school, and broken-hearted at leaving my friends and my home down in southern Minnesota. And there were pine trees all along the road. So many of the pines are gone now, and places are built up that weren't there. And I remember sitting and looking back, and I think, this is endless.
So what, the railroad then stopped at Motley then?
Yes,
Okay, so there was a railroad station and stuff right at Motley.
One time, when I was 21 years old, I was assessor for Maine Township. And there was a flyer run through to Duluth. And it didn't stop there, but you could flag it. There was another fellow in the township just north of May Township. Two of us went to town together, and we flagged the train to get to Brainerd, then took the train from there to Walker.
Well, when I went to college in Duluth, the train came through there and stopped.
Oh,
because
yeah.
I used to go and come on the
It was the
train.
main line from, Duluth west. One year they had a big wheat harvest before the days of trucking. They ran better than 50 trains a day through there.
Then everything, all the wheat harvest out of the Dakotas then went into Duluth. Yeah,
A lot of it.
now they do it mostly by truck.
Yeah.
You know that his father was a sort of veterinary?
Well, I didn't know that Ole was. I know that that Anders was in when he was in Norway. I didn't know Ole was. No.
As long as they raised horses for the king, I suppose they had to know a lot about animals, probably.
I suppose he got it from his father. Then.
I don't know if they ever had any schooling or whether they just learned it from each other, you know. But Mother Goplen always thought that was what caused his death, was because I think he had been putting a ring in a bull's nose and he got injured. And he didn't die right away, but she thought he had internal injuries and that was really why he died at such a young age.
That was why Ole died then.
Ben's father.
Mm-hmm.
I can just barely remember. I mentioned that the present house wasn't built yet then.
Mm-hmm.
They lived in the
The
granary.
granary. Just tar paper on the outside of it. And we lived in, I know we lived in that one, I don't know whether it's one winter or 2 winters before the house was built.
Mm-hmm. Well, then the barn was built quite a bit later then.
Well, they built a barn. I don't remember. It got, at the time it was built, I guess it's probably one of the biggest ones around the area there, but it really wasn't so much. And we had a terrific wind one time, and it leaned real bad. So bad that the eaves on the one side, on the west side, the water drip off and hit on the bottom of the barn. Well, when I went back on the farm, it was still standing there. I tore it down, and matter of fact, a lot of the lumber it was in the barn that I built. I cut the logs and hauled to the mill, and they were processed, siding and so forth.
So what kind of timber did you have then?
It was Norway and white pine and quite a bit of spruce.
Mm-hmm. So then later years, then it all grew up to jack pine then afterwards. Huh?
No, I don't think there's much jack pine.
There's much
He
jack
used
pine
to
up
get
there?
out,
Okay, around
Not
Brainerd.
right on that place.
Wood for
See, where our place was, that wasn't sandy. It's yellow, but it's a kind of a yellow clay loam.
Oh,
It's
okay.
not real heavy soil, but it's not real sandy.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever it's real stony, you don't find, it's not real sand.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, the jack pine, they like sand,
Yeah,
Brainerd
right.
sand. Okay. So you had regular timber up there.
Yeah,
then?
it was, see this land is on section 19, that belonged to the, I think, Pine Tree Lumber Company, if I'm not mistaken. And originally it was white pine country, it was timber country. Matter of fact, north of Leader, there was a narrow gauge railroad built in there for a logging railroad, that's what it was. That was, well, see, Leader's 13 miles north of Motley. I suppose, I don't know just how far north of Leader the railroad was. Not terribly far, because one time when I was just a young fellow, we went spearing suckers up on Home Brook or Stony Brook, on the west side of Gull Lake. And we drove with a team and wagon, and they drove on this old grade someplace. And there was places where the old ties, had rotted, but they're still kind of bumpy.